My name is Amelia, and today I want you to imagine a quiet afternoon at home when my stepdad sits down with me to give some advice about school, friendships, and hobbies. And even though I feel a little nervous and unsure at first, I realize that this is a perfect opportunity to practice listening carefully, asking questions, and responding respectfully in English. And as I prepare myself mentally, I think about all the phrases and vocabulary I will need. Expressions like, could you explain that a bit more? I understand. Thank you for the advice. What do you think I should do next? Or I appreciate your guidance. And I practice saying them aloud to feel comfortable. Because knowing the language is not enough, I also need the confidence to use it naturally in a real conversation. And I visualize the room, my stepdad sitting in his chair, papers and books around him, a cup of tea in his hand, and me across from him, listening attentively, nodding occasionally, and preparing to respond politely while keeping eye contact. And I mentally rehearse how I will react if he shares advice about managing school projects, balancing homework, or handling friendships. Imagining phrases like, I see what you mean. I will try to plan my time better, or that's a good idea. I didn't think of it that way, which helps me internalize polite responses, show understanding, and ask for clarification without feeling awkward. And I remind myself to pay attention to his tone, intonation, and choice of words because these give clues about emphasis and importance. And I also think about how to ask follow-up questions naturally. Could you give me an example? How would you handle this situation? Or what would you do if it happened to you? Which allows me to engage actively in conversation, demonstrate curiosity, and show respect. And I also reflect on my feelings, acknowledging that at first I might feel nervous or self-conscious, but by narrating my actions internally, I am listening carefully, nodding to show I understand, and preparing to respond politely. I reinforce both comprehension and verbal expression, while also practicing vocabulary related to life advice, school, friendships, hobbies, and respectful conversation. And as he begins speaking, giving advice about prioritizing schoolwork, balancing extracurricular activities, and maintaining friendships, I focus on listening for key phrases, main ideas, and suggested actions, mentally noting sentences like, it's important to finish your homework before starting other activities, or spending time with friends is valuable, but make sure it doesn't affect your responsibilities. And I rehearse responding aloud internally. I understand. I will try to organize my schedule better, or thank you. I appreciate your guidance, which builds fluency, comprehension, and confidence. I also anticipate possible follow-up questions he might ask, such as, how do you feel about this plan? Or do you think you can manage your time this way? And I mentally practice polite and thoughtful responses like, I think it will help me stay focused and balanced, or I will try. And I'll ask for help if needed. And by doing so, I am practicing real conversational English in a safe, reflective setting, which enhances both speaking and listening skills. And I narrate every action internally. I am sitting attentively, nodding, making eye contact, and repeating key ideas in my head, which reinforces retention and helps me respond accurately when prompted. And I also imagine hypothetical scenarios he might describe, such as conflicts with friends, challenges in completing a hobby project, or time management struggles. And I practice English phrases to express understanding and ask for clarification, Could you explain a different approach? Or what would you suggest if I encounter this problem, which strengthens interactive language skills? Additionally, I reflect on the importance of body language, tone, and polite expressions, realizing that saying, "Thank you for your advice," while smiling or nodding communicates respect and attentiveness. And I noticed that combining verbal and nonverbal cues makes communication more effective and natural. And I also mentally prepare for moments when he might offer critical feedback or constructive suggestions, practicing internal responses like, "I understand. I will consider that carefully," or "that makes sense. I'll apply it next time," which helps me process advice without feeling defensive and reinforces respectful communication. And I narrate the conversation as if I am explaining it to someone else, saying, "He suggested organizing my homework first, spending time on hobbies later, and maintaining friendships carefully," which practices summarizing, paraphrasing, and using complete sentences in English. And by narrating, reflecting, and repeating key points aloud, I am not only improving listening comprehension, but also preparing to respond confidently in real time, while expanding my vocabulary, sentence structure, and fluency. And I imagine discussing hobbies, such as drawing, music, or sports, and responding with phrases like, "I enjoy drawing, but I will try to allocate specific time for it," or "I love playing the piano." Thank you for suggesting a schedule, which combines advice-related vocabulary with polite conversation and reflective thinking. And I also pay attention to tone changes, pauses, and emphasis in his speech, which gives me subtle cues about priority and importance. And I narrate these observations aloud. He emphasized homework first and hobbies second, which I should follow, reinforcing comprehension, memory, and attentive listening. And as the conversation continues, I practice asking for examples, clarifying points, and summarizing advice internally. So I should focus on schoolwork, balance hobbies, and maintain friendships while managing my time, which strengthens comprehension, paraphrasing, and conversational flow. And I also reflect on my feelings, noticing that I feel more confident, prepared, and connected, because actively listening, narrating, and responding respectfully allows me to absorb advice, practice English, and demonstrate understanding. And by continuously practicing these strategies, listening carefully, asking questions politely, narrating internally, summarizing, and responding, I am training myself to engage naturally in any real-life conversation, follow guidance accurately, expand vocabulary, use polite expressions, and build confidence in speaking English fluently and respectfully. And this extensive preparation sets the stage for more advanced interactions with my stepdad, applying advice in everyday situations and developing the habit of attentive listening, thoughtful questioning, and courteous responses, which are essential for building strong relationships, improving English communication, and gaining practical life skills. And by turning these interactions into immersive practice sessions, I can steadily increase both language proficiency and social awareness, making English learning contextual, meaningful, and directly applicable to real-life conversations, school challenges, friendships, and personal development. And this mindset prepares me to continue learning, practicing, and growing, turning each piece of advice into actionable knowledge while strengthening fluency, comprehension, and polite conversation skills. And this is exactly how interacting with a stepdad and receiving life advice becomes not just a lesson in life, but a highly practical and immersive English learning opportunity, combining vocabulary, reflective thinking, active listening, question asking, and respectful response in one continuous, natural, and self-talking style. As the conversation with my stepdad continues, I start actively applying the advice he gives me, realizing that listening carefully is just the first step, and real learning happens when I respond, reflect, and practice the language and context. And for example, when he talks about managing schoolwork more effectively, I mentally rehearse phrases like, I will prioritize my assignments first, then focus on hobbies, or I can set a schedule to balance school, friends, and personal interests. And I also narrate my actions aloud. I am opening my planner, writing down homework deadlines, and assigning time for drawing and piano practice, which reinforces vocabulary related to school, time management, and organization, while also improving sentence structure, fluency, and clarity. And when he suggests strategies for handling friendships, like being honest, respectful, and empathetic, I practice responses such as, I understand. I will listen carefully and communicate respectfully with my friends, or thank you for the guidance. I will try to be considerate and supportive, which strengthens polite conversation, comprehension, and appropriate social language. And I also imagine applying advice about hobbies, such as dedicating time, practicing consistently, and staying motivated, saying internally, I will practice piano for 30 minutes daily and complete my sketching exercises weekly, which reinforces goal-oriented language, routine vocabulary, and self-directed reflection in English. During these interactions, I also practice asking for clarification whenever I do not fully understand a point, using phrases like, could you give me an example? What would you suggest if I encounter a problem? Or can you explain that in a different way? And I mentally rehearse repeating these questions aloud, naturally and politely, which strengthens comprehension, critical thinking, and interactive skills. And I narrate the scenario internally. I'm listening carefully, pausing to reflect, asking clarifying questions, and summarizing advice in my own words, which reinforces active listening and ensures that I fully grasp the guidance being given, while simultaneously practicing sentence formation, vocabulary, and polite expressions. I also imagine hypothetical situations my stepdad mentions, like a conflict with a classmate, a challenge with a hobby project, or feeling overwhelmed by school assignments, and I rehearse responses aloud. If a classmate is upset, I will try to understand their perspective and communicate calmly. Or if I make a mistake in my drawing, I will practice again and learn from it, which allows me to apply life advice practically while practicing English phrases for problem solving, reflection, and respectful communication. And I narrate these imagined actions aloud to strengthen both fluency and comprehension. Throughout the conversation, I focus on the vocabulary related to advice, guidance, suggestions, and reflection, saying phrases like, I appreciate your advice. That makes sense. I will follow your suggestion, and thank you for explaining, which not only reinforces polite conversation, but also expands my functional English vocabulary in real-life contexts. I also observe tone, intonation, and subtle stress in my stepdad's voice, noting which points he emphasizes. And I practice paraphrasing. He emphasized planning homework before hobbies, And I understand that this is the priority, which builds comprehension, listening for nuance and language processing skills. And I narrate my reflections aloud to reinforce memory and fluency. I am focusing on the advice about time management and repeating it in my own words, which strengthens active engagement and mental rehearsal, a critical part of advanced listening and speaking practice. As I continue, I simulate follow-up questions and responses, imagining he might ask, "How will you implement this strategy?" Or, "What will you do if you forget?" And I respond internally, "I will make a checklist and follow my schedule strictly." Or, "I will remind myself daily and seek help if needed," practicing conditional phrases, future tense, and polite, reflective language, which enhances grammar, vocabulary, and conversational flow, while also reinforcing comprehension and respectful interaction. I also focus on expressing understanding and appreciation throughout the advice session, saying internally or aloud, "I understand your point. Thank you for sharing it. I will apply this guidance carefully." Or, "I really appreciate your support and suggestions," which strengthen social language, emotional intelligence, and fluency, and I narrate actions during practice. I am taking notes, repeating advice aloud, asking clarifying questions, and summarizing key points in English, which allows me to consolidate learning and apply it practically. Additionally, I imagine multiple scenarios involving school projects, friendships, and hobbies, and I practice responding respectfully and fluently using phrases like, "I see your point." "I will try this method. That's helpful advice." "I will remember it." Or, "I understand how I can improve my time management." And I narrate each step. I am organizing my tasks, communicating politely, and reflecting on my progress, which reinforces both language and life skills simultaneously. By continuously listening, asking questions, narrating internally, summarizing advice, and applying strategies in imagined scenarios, I build a strong foundation for real-world interaction, improve vocabulary related to guidance, problem solving, social communication, and polite conversation. And I also practice reflective thinking, self-directed learning, and fluency, turning the advice session into a highly immersive English learning experience. Through repeated engagement, mental rehearsal, and practical application, I gradually feel more confident, articulate, and capable of responding naturally to advice from my stepdad or any adult mentor. And by narrating these interactions aloud or mentally, I integrate listening comprehension, polite conversational phrases, vocabulary, reflective responses, and fluency development in one continuous immersive practice, which is exactly how advanced learners can combine language learning with real-life skills, social etiquette, and personal development, making English learning meaningful, practical, and contextually rich. As the advice session with my stepdad concludes, I take a quiet moment to reflect on everything I've learned today, thinking about the guidance he gave regarding school, friendships, and hobbies, and how I can actively apply it in my daily life. And I realize that reflection is just as important as listening, because by thinking through each piece of advice, repeating it mentally or aloud, and summarizing it in my own words, I consolidate both language skills and practical life lessons, and I narrate my reflections internally, saying, "He suggested prioritizing schoolwork, balancing hobbies, maintaining friendships respectfully, and communicating politely." And I repeat these phrases aloud, practicing pronunciation, sentence structure, and vocabulary related to advice, guidance, and polite conversation, which reinforces English fluency in a natural context. And I also think about the moments when I ask for clarification, using phrases like, "Could you explain that further?" Or, "What would you do in this situation?" And I mentally review how this active engagement helped me understand his advice more deeply. And I narrate, I asked for examples, listened carefully, and summarized his suggestions in my own words, which strengthens comprehension, interaction skills, and confidence in real-life English communication. I also reflect on my stepdad's tone, emphasis, and nonverbal cues, noting how he stressed certain points about time management, responsibility, and respectful behavior. And I narrate aloud. He emphasized balancing homework and hobbies carefully, and I will apply this by planning my schedule and following it consistently, which allows me to internalize nuanced meaning and practice both listening and expressive English simultaneously. Thinking further, I consider practical scenarios where I can implement his advice, such as planning my school projects, resolving conflicts with friends, or dedicating time to hobbies. And I rehearse phrases for these situations. I will organize my homework first and then enjoy my hobbies. If a friend disagrees, I will listen and respond calmly. And I will practice drawing or piano consistently, which builds functional vocabulary, reflective thinking, and fluent communication. And I narrate these imagined actions aloud to strengthen memory, sentence formation, and natural expression. I also review the polite conversational strategies I practiced, noticing how saying "thank you for your advice," "I really appreciate your guidance," or "could you clarify this for me?" not only improves English fluency, but also demonstrates respect and attentiveness. And I mentally narrate, I express gratitude, ask questions politely, and summarized advice clearly, which reinforces social communication and language skills together. During this reflection, I think about how the advice applies beyond school and hobbies, realizing that learning to listen, ask questions, and respond respectfully will help in friendships, group activities, and future professional situations. And I mentally practice responses for these contexts. I understand the instructions. I will consider your suggestion carefully, and I appreciate your support and guidance, which trains my mind to respond fluently, politely, and confidently in any English conversation. I also reflect on how narrating internally, summarizing aloud, and rehearsing scenarios enhances comprehension, memory retention, and active language use. And I imagine repeating this process daily, turning advice sessions into immersive English learning experiences that combine vocabulary, listening, speaking, reflective thinking, and social etiquette. And I narrate aloud. I will listen carefully to guidance, ask clarifying questions, summarize the advice in my own words, and apply it practically, which consolidates all aspects of language learning while reinforcing life skills. Additionally, I think about moments of challenge, like understanding nuanced suggestions, handling critical feedback, or responding to unfamiliar situations, and I practice responses aloud. I will try my best and learn from mistakes, or I understand your point and will adjust my actions accordingly, which builds resilience, confidence, and advanced conversational ability in English. And I narrate these reflections continuously, reinforcing vocabulary, grammar, and polite expressions while integrating practical life lessons. Furthermore, I consider the broader impact of following advice, improved relationships with family, enhanced self-discipline, stronger time management, better social communication, and increased fluency. And I mentally narrate, by applying these strategies, I can maintain respectful friendships, balance responsibilities, and communicate effectively, which strengthens functional English in real-life contexts. And I also reflect on emotional intelligence, observing how attentive listening, polite questioning, and thoughtful responses help me build rapport, understand perspectives, and navigate social dynamics. And I narrate aloud. I listened carefully, acknowledged his points, asked questions politely, and responded thoughtfully, which combines English practice with interpersonal skills. I also review vocabulary and phrases from the conversation. Advice, guidance, clarification, prioritize, balance, responsibility, practice, respect, communicate, and apply, repeating them aloud. Creating a rich mental map of language for everyday life. And I think about how this practice can be extended to other mentors, teachers, or peers. Rehearsing phrases for varied contexts. I appreciate your advice. Could you explain this further? And I will try to apply this carefully, which ensures that the skills learned are transferable and versatile. Finally, I reflect on my personal growth, noticing increased confidence, fluency, and awareness of social etiquette. And I narrate aloud. I am more confident in listening to advice, responding politely, summarizing key points, and applying suggestions in daily life. And I realized that by continuously practicing listening, asking clarifying questions, narrating, summarizing, and reflecting, I am transforming real-life advice sessions into powerful English learning opportunities, developing advanced vocabulary, respectful conversation skills, fluency, comprehension, and critical thinking simultaneously. And I encourage viewers to do the same. Actively listen to advice from mentors, narrate internally, summarize key points aloud, practice polite responses, reflect on lessons learned, and apply guidance in practical situations. Because this approach turns everyday life into immersive, effective, and enjoyable English learning, helping learners build confidence, vocabulary, social skills, and fluency, and ensuring that each conversation, piece of guidance, or mentoring moment contributes directly to mastery of English in a natural, real-world, and self-talking style that is both practical and transformational.